Hi and welcome to The Courageous Collective, the podcast where we celebrate diverse women who dare to do things differently. I'm Rupa Baradva, a copywriter and communication specialist. I work with women entrepreneurs to help them get clear on their brand messaging, and I help them become more visible to their target customers using PR.
And I'm Vardeep Edwards, founder of The Branding Fox, a design consultancy that supports women in business with their branding and design needs. After working in corporate roles, we both took the leap into self-employment and created our own businesses where our skills and experience could really shine. But something we both noticed was the lack of women that looked like us at events, on speaker panels and in the media.
Which is why we created the Courageous Collective podcast. This is our platform to celebrate and champion diverse women who are smashing it in their businesses. In each episode, we speak to a female founder about the story behind their business. We explore their inspirations, the challenges they faced and how they've dealt with them. And we talk about what they're yet to achieve.
Welcome to the Courageous Collective and enjoy today's episode. So welcome to today's episode of the Courageous Collective podcast. We're thrilled to have you join us for today's guest episode. Today, we are diving into the culinary world with a talented pastry chef who honed her craft at Le Cordon Bleu and has made her mark in London's top restaurants. Not only is she a genius in the kitchen, but she's also a best-selling author with 3 cookbooks under her belt, including the latest, Baking for Pleasure. She regularly writes about food for The Guardian and The Telegraph. You may recognise her as the host of Junior Bake Off since 2020, but there's so much more to her story. She's also created Countertalk, which is a network dedicated to uplifting and supporting people within the food industry. And then there's Damson Jelly Academy, her innovative online cookery school. She's on a mission to take the fear out of baking, and today we are so excited to have her join us on our podcast. Please welcome Ravneet Gill. Thank you, Ravi, so much for joining us today.
Course. Sorry that the radiator is my background, but it's warm and also downstairs there's a crying baby, so it's better up here.
You know what? It's the beginning of the year still. It's cold outside, so it's totally understandable. But, we're so excited to have you here today, and we'd like to be able to share a bit more of your story with our listeners. And one of the first things I wanted to ask you was what inspired you to become a pastry chef, and was that always the plan?
Definitely not. So I went to university to do a psychology degree, and the intention was to never go off and be a chef. But then in my 3rd year, when the thought of going down more of an academic route hit me, I thought, no, I can't do that. No way. I want to start getting stuck into work. So that's when I decided to go off and be a chef.
So did you complete your psychology degree then? Did you have that? Oh, right. Okay.
I'm a 2-1. That's all I needed to make my mum happy. And then I left.
Ticked the box and moved on to something completely different. So,
yes.
So what made you go down that route then? What happened?
Well, I always loved cooking for people. And at uni, I actually spent most of my time just cooking for friends. And then pastry and dessert, always had a massive sweet tooth. And actually at cookery school, it was cheaper to do either baking on its own, like patisserie, or cooking rather than doing the combined course. So I could only afford one and I chose pastry.
Right, okay. Wow, that's turned out to be quite a good choice for you by the sounds of things.
And the thing is, I think people think that it's seems like a quick thing, but it was about years and years of slogging it out in restaurants, thinking, where on earth is this going? And where is my life going? So it feels nice now, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, I think that's the case with a lot of people, especially online. You suddenly see the success that some people have, and it's like it's overnight when actually it's been years and years in the building. And it's interesting that your career has taken that change, but it hasn't really sort of changed since then. Since you decided to be a pastry chef, that's been it, hasn't it? And that's the journey that you've been on since.
Yeah, very much so.
Oh, well, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Ravneet. You are a woman of many talents, pastry chef, newspaper columnist, host of Junior Bake Off, author of 3 cookbooks, plus your own cookery school. Would you describe yourself as a business owner?
Yes, if you put it like that. but it wasn't always the intention. It's just more that I've sort of built upon this career and like added things and added things. And I've had to figure out things like how to start up a company, how to trademark things, how to, set up bank accounts. All of that has come off the back of just doing it as I go. I'm one of those people that if I have an idea, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make it happen. How do I make it happen? So I had to really think on my feet to make all of the little things happen.
Yeah. And I guess your experience in the kitchen, which usually is quite a male-dominated environment, has that helped kind of steer the ship when it comes to running a business?
I mean, yeah, I think that people say it's like a male-dominated environment and sometimes it comes across negatively. But actually, some of my biggest advocates and supporters and mentors are men. And I've had the most incredible men in the food world support me and show me the way, and I feel very grateful to them. But in terms of kitchen structure, everything is quite militant and organized, and if you can drill that into yourself, it creates such a good work ethic. So I think that has really helped me. And I was talking to my husband, he's a chef, and we were both saying the other day that we have a newborn baby and we're both working very much still, and our baby's 3 months, and we're tired, but we're not that tired. And everyone keeps being like, are you tired? And we're like, not really. Because, and I mean this really nicely, but being a chef is so brutally physically exhausting and draining, like unimaginably so, especially if you're working double shifts every day, which we used to do together. And we were saying this really just doesn't feel as bad. Like, can we say that? So I think it gears you up to be so resilient.
Yeah.
And if you can, get in the trenches in there, then you can, like, I don't know, it can help you in a lot of different ways.
You can do anything, basically.
Yeah,
so yeah.
yeah.
I love that.
That's it's a really interesting comparison because I've got 2 kids, so I remember what it's like having a newborn. It's really tiring. It's very different. But for you to say that it's almost like your training has helped you, to deal with that, it's quite crazy actually to think about that. And when you think back to when you were doing that in your early days, did you find that tough then, that kind of world, and how hard that was to work like that?
Yeah, I always remember being so physically and mentally drained that I'd get into bed at the end of a shift, and often it would have been like I've been up since 6, and I'd get into bed about 1:30, and I'd be up again at 6. Wow. And I remember getting into bed and my whole body like pulsating, and your feet are just throbbing, and you're so tired that you knock out straight away, or your brain is like overthinking because you've had such a mad day, and all I could hear was the ticket printer in my brain. But I think that like it does build you up in a good way, and I'm so used to that now that this is light work for me.
This is easy. Oh my goodness. That's off to you. I mean, goodness. I don't know how you did that, to be honest.
I don't know. And at the time, I think that because it was my only professional job, I thought it was normal to be like that and to work like that. So 60, 70-hour weeks were very normal.
Wow.
And now I work from home or I do other things, and I'm always like, oh, this is so luxurious.
And that didn't put you off then, working that many hours from so early on?
No. And I think because at first I lived at home with my family and I was miserable. I wasn't really enjoying it, but I couldn't show them that I wasn't enjoying it because I'd taken this massive career change. So I think that part of it was, even if I didn't like it, I didn't want to say anything to anyone. I just kept going. And I think when you stick with something for long enough, you can learn to enjoy it in some ways.
Well, no, I think you've definitely got a knack and a talent for it as well. It's probably a bit more than just, sticking to it. Do you want to talk to us a bit more about the Damson Jelly Academy as well, and what made you set that up?
So it's just like an online cookery school that was sort of born out of lockdown, and I started doing a lot of online tutorials during that time that really took off. So I decided to formalize it, and I give a course away back to a kid in a school who wants to learn, because when I was at school, I didn't do home ec after the age of about, I think I got up to GCSE, and I didn't do it at GCSE because they said, you're not very good at this. And then, and also a lot of those resources have been pulled. So I just thought, if I had known back then that I was interested in cooking and food, maybe I wouldn't have then been in university debt, and and I would have gone straight into the culinary world. So it's a bit more about trying to inspire people to consider it as a career path if that's what they want, but equally, if not, the kids in school just learn another skill. So it's been quite well received in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing that you're able to give back like that. Obviously, Bupa and I are both from creative backgrounds, and sometimes, well, I know we've got our own experiences of what that's like with the wider family, and also pursuing that as a career option as well. So, yes, that's amazing that you're able to do that and give that back.
I love that you give back to school children. What's your kind of overall purpose, would you say? What drives you? Because obviously giving back is quite a big part of what you do. I mean, you've we'll talk about your Countertalk community shortly, but what is the purpose and kind of the thing that drives you?
Oh, I don't know. I think I'm a really hard worker. Not I think I am a very hard worker. And I think that came from my parents because they are incredibly hardworking. Like my dad retrained as an accountant when he was 40 and became a sensei in his 40s.
Oh,
And like
goodness.
even now he's in his 60s. He works 6 days a week and he'll come home from his day job and then he'll work and do all his office stuff for himself in the evening. So he works incredibly hard. And my mum, for years, either worked in our school as like the dinner lady, the teaching assistant, but then was also my grandma's carer. And I think I've really learned from them that it's important to work and, do things for other people, but also like keep your head down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes it's a bad thing because my husband's the opposite. I'm like, you've got to keep working, live in fear. Whereas my husband's like, enjoy yourself, chill out, very laid back.
Yeah.
And I think I've just got this mentality that you've just got to keep going for like a purpose and you've got to keep doing things. I don't know. Sometimes I should slow down, but I can't yet.
Yeah, especially when you're enjoying it as well. It's quite difficult, isn't it? It's like, you're obviously creating lots of different things, and sometimes it is quite difficult to actually put a self-enforced break in as well.
Yeah. Very, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think when it's your own business as well, it's hard to just stop and I need to stop or take a break. It's just continuous, isn't there? And there's always something to do as well.
Yeah.
So Countertalk is a community that you've created in an effort to make hospitality workplaces better. Can you talk to us a bit more about that and what made you start that?
Well, I started Countertalk because it wasn't meant to be what it is now. And now we've got about 6 people in the team, and it's a fully fledged business. Wow. And it very much takes profit, which I'm really surprised at because I started it as an Instagram page, and the idea was that it was going to just create more awareness and more of a community for people in hospitality. Because when I was in it, I used to feel quite lonely because I only knew the people in my restaurant or the people in other restaurants that I'd worked in. And I remember thinking it'd be nice if we could all group together a bit more. And the reason why it started is because I had an experience where I'd worked in restaurants and I didn't really like them that much. And then I found an incredible workplace, which is a restaurant called St. John. And I loved working there so much. It felt like a holiday. But, in terms of like everybody was lovely and I loved going into work every day. It was just this feeling of complete joy and work. And when I left St. John, I remember going into other bad places, some bad ones, some good ones. And I remember saying to people, but there are some really good ones. I promise you they exist. Yeah. I've worked in this place. It's amazing. And like telling people in kitchens that amazing places exist. And then sort of realizing that not everyone knows that. So I started shouting about it online, highlighting the places that are doing it well rather than focusing on the negative stuff. Yeah. And then it really picked up and people suddenly started taking to this idea that working in hospitality can be fun and it can be enjoyable if you put certain practices in place. Yeah. And that's kind of how it took off.
And what kind of things would you say like make a better place? So can you give us some examples?
Yeah, I mean, in hospitality, it's really typical to work 60, 70 hours a week. And I don't actually think always that it's a bad thing if you choose to do that. Like I used to choose to do that because I wanted to. But sometimes you're not always compensated for that work, and that can be quite tricky. There's definitely a balance in hospitality of wanting to work hard to learn versus like being worked to the bone for no reason. And I think that there are simple things like rota requests. So in some restaurants, you're on a 7-day rota, and that means that you can be working anytime, any shift. And a lot of places will only tell you on the Sunday before the Monday. Wow. And doing things like that means that you don't have a life because you can't make any plans. And I used to find that so restrictive because your friends would be messaging you saying, when can you hang out? And it'd be the Sunday until you could find out when you could hang out. And then maybe even you say Saturday or Friday and then you get called in. And it's just this sort of like loss of life. And I think it's really important to know that you'll get more out of people if you let them feel like they have autonomy over themselves.
Yeah.
So one of the really simple things is like, we promote something like rota requests. So 2 weeks before, you can say, in 2 weeks time, I'd love to have Wednesday evening off because I got plans and I'd love to. And at St. John, they were always honoured. And that made me feel like I could go back to the gym and I could actually see my friends. I could go and see a play and all these things. So simple things like that. And also things like eating together and having staff food. Because in restaurants, if you work in hospitality, you usually work all day and you don't eat well or you don't have time to eat. But putting in place, you've got to stop for half an hour a day and all sit and have food together, or there has to be a system in place where everyone can go off and have a half an hour break or something like that. But we like promoting the fact that those things make a big difference to your day.
Yeah, they're such simple things, aren't they? They're not like massive kind of, deal breakers, but actually, just having that time to sit with your colleagues and actually break bread. I mean, how lovely is that?
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's really helpful to hear. So, as you know, Vardy very much is a branding specialist. So we always ask our guests about branding. What would you say is your personal brand, and is branding important in the culinary world?
Yes, I think branding is huge, and some places do it so well. And everyone is always like, I love Bao, and I love what they've done with their brand. I just think the creativity and simplicity of Bao is so beautiful and iconic, to the point where you could see something from Bao and know immediately it's from there. And I love brands like that. And I think that hospitality really allows you to be creative. And there's a lot of people that have, used their creativity in food to create something special. But with me, personal brand wise, I think, I don't know, it's, I don't know, very, very much wrapped up in sweet things. and my whole online persona, I guess, would be based around, used to be based around my grandma, and like having this really fun relationship with her and baking nice things and cooking and sharing it. So I don't know, I guess it's still on that vein of homeliness.
Yeah.
Did you grow up with a lot of sweet things being baked at home? Do you think any of that influenced you at all, any home cooking?
I mean, my mum cannot bake, and I just find it heartbreaking. She can't bake at all. She's an amazing cook, but I used to always like ask her to make me pancakes or make me a trifle, and it was never good. The only thing that was good was the trifle, because it was all packet stuff from the supermarket. Back then you take the lady fingers, you pour your jelly,
pretty much.
The custard, the whipped cream and the sprinkles, and I loved that. So no, I definitely didn't learn, but maybe I learned because I was like missing it, and I needed to fill that gap.
Do you think that's a South Asian thing as well? Because I know, like, the oven and my mum just don't seem to get on. I don't know what
the oven.
The oven's fault. I'm terrible. My mum's a really good cook, but
she's
it's
amazing.
not passed down to me at all.
But Ravneet, your husband's a good cook.
He
John's
is
good, right?
Oh, look, I'm just going to be really naughty and pop this up here. What I bought him for Christmas.
Sorry,
just because this is a podcast, I've just bought Revy's book, and we have made your cake, but I really want him to make the Nadia sausage rolls. I'm waiting for him to take that.
Yes. They're quite a challenge. So if he manages them, please send me a photo.
Yes, I'm sure he will one day. Anyway, so that's great to hear about your personal brand, and I think that's quite. Talking of my own experience, I think that's quite key these days. I think everybody has a personal brand, and especially in this online world. So it's interesting how yours has evolved over the last few years as well. But also alongside that, do you sort of take efforts to market yourself? Do you actually think about that, or is that just part of your sharing your story and your journey? Sort of, how do you sort of go about that?
I wouldn't say that there's like a specific agenda or plan. A lot of it is just kind of what springs to mind, or I kind of know that things that I will say yes or no to. And I think when you do things online, it's really easy to get drawn out into wanting to, like, a lot of brands will send you things, and a lot of you can get a lot of free things, and you can also get drawn into getting paid sums of money to do adverts for things. And I think the key is to always remember what your values are and to sort of make sure that those things align with that, because the second they don't, you lose all your value. So at the beginning, when my profile started growing, I started getting lots of offers for adverts and sending me these things, and I can see where people get carried away with that and where it backfires. And I think that when all of those things were coming in, I thought, God, how am I going to decipher between the good ones and the bad ones for my audience? Because it's always for your audience, because without them, you don't really, you don't have a say, right? And so I would always say, I've either got to genuinely love the brand or use it, or, you know, normally I would spend money with this brand, or the brand would enable me to give something back. So it's whether, if their money pays for me to be able to create content that would give users value, or I could run a competition or do something where, you know, someone can win something. It was always between those two things. Like, does it feel authentic, or do I get to give back? And if it didn't hit either of those things, then I would say no. And I think having strong values like that makes a big difference, especially online.
I think that authenticity bit is really key, isn't it? Because you know, our audience will be able to see whether it is or not. So I think having that alignment and knowing what that is as well for your values is it's really important. And it's good that you're really aware of that as well. That's really good to hear, isn't it?
And I guess with all the kind of ad deals and obviously breaking into TV, obviously you've got your media profile as well. You've kind of had to learn to navigate lots and lots of different circles as well. How have you kind of done that?
I think it's not very easy. And I think there's a lot of learning that takes place. A lot of mistakes happen. So I wouldn't say it was effortlessly done. And also from working in a kitchen all the time to being a bit of a hermit, because you're in the kitchen working away, to then suddenly having to be in important meetings or dress professionally and talk about things that, you know, you wouldn't normally be a part of the conversation. It's quite weird. And then learning that you don't need to try and be someone else, just be yourself. Because at the beginning I was like, oh gosh, I don't know all of these fancy words and I don't dress like this. But actually people like you more for who you are. So gotta let go of things like that.
Yeah. And you come across as yourself, I think, on TV. You're very authentic. And I mean, personally, watching you on Junior Bake Off with my children is incredible. So I have 2 young boys, and the fact that there's a South Asian woman hosting that program says so much to them as well as to me, because it shows just how far they can go and achieve and dream. And they love it, by the way. They absolutely love Junior Bake Off.
I'm so glad.
To the point where it's like, oh, mummy, what are we going to bake this weekend? You know, it's actually instilled a little bit of fire in them to kind of get in the kitchen, which is great. So yeah, definitely think you're doing a fabulous job on there.
That makes me very happy.
Wanted to talk to you about any challenges that you might have faced while running multiple businesses and how you've overcome them.
I think challenges are navigating the professional side of trying to do everything, like making sure that you're registering things like VAT and tax return and making sure that everything's up to date, and you've started payroll and blah blah blah. And I think invoicing and all of that stuff is things that I don't personally feel have ever been taught to me. So I've had to really learn on the go, and I'm very lucky that my dad and my brother are very good at admin, and they've helped me a lot with things like that, because without them I think I would have made more of a mess of everything. So juggling that side is hard, because I think when you're creative, you want to do all the creative things and you can forget that all the other stuff needs to happen. But if you do, you could get in trouble. So I'm so grateful to my dad and brother, because without them, I wouldn't be able to get all of the other things done.
It's something we hear all the time. And I think we both, Pradeep and I, have this conversation quite regularly, generally about this time of year, actually, when it comes to tax.
Time, but, just before the end of Jan.
Yeah, totally. Being creative, you just want to spend your time creating, don't you? And it's so easy to get carried away with that and then realize, oh yeah, I've got that massive tax bill to pay. So you're completely right in that having, to surround yourself with people that can help you makes all the difference.
And how do you measure success then? I mean, we talked about you seeing yourself as a business owner. I don't know if that was always the case from the beginning. do you have like a measure of success in terms of what you might want to achieve, or you think, okay, this is great, I've done this now?
It's funny because my husband says to me often when I'm freaking out about not like maybe not working as much because I'm like I always want to keep doing things. He always says you don't ever stop and reflect on what you've done. And maybe you would have thought that this is successful. Like if I told you this 10 years ago, and I always have to stop and go, oh yeah, actually, I have done things.
Yeah.
But I think my measure of success is very much that I'm very happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, I think I always have to remind myself, I'm not very materialistic, which is a good thing because I don't care about having like designer things or a nice car. My car is awful. But my measure of success is like I have a nice kitchen to cook in and I'm able to choose the work I want to do. And being able to have choice over work when you've spent so long not having any choice over how you work and what you work for is the most freeing thing ever.
Yeah.
So I feel so grateful that I have the choice to say yes or no to things.
That's it's so great to hear, isn't it? And I think especially as a mum, a new mum, I think, I totally relate to that, is having that lifestyle that helps you, because that's what's going to bring you the joy and the happiness.
How about any advice can you share with maybe some of our listeners who might consider working for themselves? Maybe they're thinking of getting into the culinary world. Any kind of advice that you would share?
Want to get into the culinary world, I would say don't be afraid of hard work and do it. Get stuck in because socializing is great, but there is a time for it. And if I had maybe been a bit more, I don't know, if I hadn't been as hardworking back in the day, I wouldn't be where I am now. And it really does pay off. I really think, oh my goodness, this isn't paying off. This 16-day job isn't doing anything for me. And also, I remember thinking, God, I'm on like £6 an hour, and all my friends are in grad schemes, and their starting salary is 30K, and mine is 18. And I remember being jealous and thinking, God, am I ever going to make that money? Yes, you will. But you just have to be willing to put in the hard work and the hard graft. And if you want to get into the culinary world, I'll say do it because there are so many different avenues. You don't have to just go in and say, okay, I'm going to work in a kitchen for the rest of my life. You might do 5 years in a kitchen, love it, work so hard, and then go off and be a food stylist or a TV food producer. You might go and do food writing, recipe development, and you can go in so many different avenues. It's such a creative world. It's all about trying new things. You might want to go off and be a private chef for somebody, or you might want to go and specialize in wedding cakes or tablescaping. But whatever it is that you want to do, creating that hard work ethic at the beginning will help you get there. That's what I say. But don't be afraid of that.
And there is something, isn't there, about creating food for other people as well? Because Vardeep and I heard Nisha Katona speak quite recently, and she really talks about that experience of serving people. And I mean, I think back to my days of working in retail. That really was a great basis to then build my career on. I didn't end up in retail, but helping other people or working with the public actually does really help build those skills for life, doesn't it? Would you say?
Exactly. And it's a nice thing, though. I think being of service is nice. And although I'm not Sikh, like I wouldn't call myself Sikh because of the way I am. But I think having that slightly molded upbringing, being in the temple all the time, and learning to cook for, like, serving others and doing the dishes and being around that environment is actually doesn't stay with you.
Yeah, and I think that is like an influence generally. I think growing up in a family, I've seen that as well with my families and aunties and in the wider community. It becomes normal, doesn't it? Because you've grown up seeing that a lot. It's a nice way to kind of think about it as well. You can see how you do that with creating your community, and you're also teaching as well. So food really does sort of help bring these different communities together as well. And what sort of motivates you, Ravi, then? What kind of, keeps you going?
I think before it was always like an ambition of certain work goals that I wanted to hit and what I wanted to do. And now it's very much just creating a life where I'm still on this, lifestyle where I can choose to say yes and no to things. So I think I'm always motivated by the fact that if I just keep working hard, I can keep saying yes and no to things. And also now I have a lovely baby. Nothing's more important to me. I never thought I'd think like that. And I think, okay, well, the most important thing now is making sure that my baby has a good life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's motivating in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it?
Certainly changes things once you have
It
children.
really does.
Definitely does. Okay, so final question from us then. So what's the kind of future hold for you, say, the next couple of years? Are there any kind of big goals, good big plans that you can share with us? Anything exciting coming up?
I think at the moment I'm just focusing on really promoting this book that's just come out and working on my recipe testing, because I've got a whole other load of recipes to start working on. And me and my husband, because he's a savoury chef, I'm a sweet chef, we love working together to create things. So I think you'll see more of us working together. We've got some really fun things in the pipeline. So without saying too much, I hope that we can bring that to life a bit more.
Oh, I love that. The husband and wife duo.
We might kill each other in the process, but we might,
Can't wait to hear all about that. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ravneet. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. We will share the details where people can find you on socials in our show notes. And thank you for listening to today's episode with the brilliant Ravneet Gill. We hope her story and insights have left you feeling motivated and inspired. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, do share the episode with your friends and your networks. Leave us a review. It really does help us bring you amazing guests. Thank you, and we will see you soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. The Courageous Collective is created by Rupa Paradva and Vardeep Edwards. We really appreciate your feedback, so please like, share and follow us. Please also subscribe to receive an alert for our next episode.
You can find out where to follow us on social media in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a future guest, please do get in touch. Thanks, and see you soon.